بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى أهله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. You guys, welcome to new and improved edition of Post-Isha Gems. I'm going to turn on my IG live as well to create some sort of a dual system going. So welcome to the new and improved edition of Post-Isha Gems. Over the last few months, y'all, those of you who have been following us, we have been studying this beautiful book known as Al-Adab Al-Mufrad of Imam Al-Bukhari. Now, the crazy thing is, when we first started, we started this book in a masjid in front of a physical audience. Well, now we don't have that luxury anymore, do we? So we thought, why not bring you a virtual audience? And not just any virtual audience, but a virtual audience of young people, incredible young people in our community who have been so dedicated to this Post-Isha Gems effort. They're the ones who are enabling these nightly reflections by live streaming it on YouTube, by live streaming it on Facebook, IG. They have been uploading it on YouTube, subhanAllah. And I thought, instead of me just getting in front of the camera and yapping, why don't we have a virtual audience that we can engage? We get to hear from these young people. We get to fire off questions. And as I get to fire off questions and they get to answer, at the same time, we have people on IG who are also kind of tuning in. So the goal is when I fire off a question, y'all get to answer, the virtual folks, but IG people get to answer as well. I want to see if IG people can beat y'all. So we'll see, inshallah. Get a little competition going. Get some spice behind this effort of ours. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this a means of benefit. So let's begin. Today, inshallah, we resume our study of Hadith number 18. And this Hadith is brought to us by Abu Darda radiyallahu anhu. Now, y'all, here's my first question. It's a bit of an unfair question, but inshallah, life is not fair anyways. So here's the first question. When did Abu Darda pass away? If anybody knows the answer, unmute yourself and just say the answer. If anybody on IG, if y'all know the answer, drop it. When did Abu Darda radiyallahu anhu pass away? And y'all know? I'm gonna wait 2-3 seconds and then I'm gonna drop the answer. I know that's a tough question, but you know what? Our scholars of Hadith, that's how they roll, man. They know the dates of birth and the death date on top of their head, and that's how they know who died when and if the Hadith are connected or not. Abu Darda died 32 Hijri, and that is almost 20 years after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, Abu Darda started this hadith by telling us that the Prophet ﷺ, he was connecting with me. Like, he wasn't like shoving religious knowledge down my throat. He was like vibing with me. And the Prophet ﷺ, in this beautiful setting, he told me, he says, he gave me 9 pieces of advice. And he dropped these 9 pieces of advice. And now Abu Darda is kind of telling us one by one what they were. First advice that the Prophet ﷺ gave him. And once again, I'm going to ask y'all, this seems to be the consistent first advice the Prophet ﷺ gives. We have seen another list before where the Prophet was giving advice. Once again, the Prophet is giving advice. Y'all guess, what was the first advice the Prophet ﷺ gave? If y'all know, unmute yourself. And if you know on Instagram, if you know, share the answer. What do you think was the first advice the Prophet ﷺ gave? Any ideas? Otherwise, I'm gonna help you all out today. I know it's the first day. We're gonna knock off some rust, and we're gonna get the ball rolling. The first advice the Prophet ﷺ gave was, "La tushrik billahi shay'an." Don't commit shirk with Allah. And that's something the Prophet always begins with. Quran usually begins any list of advices with, "Don't have rivals with Allah." There's no competition with Allah. So that was the first advice the Prophet ﷺ gave. Second advice the Prophet ﷺ gave him was, do not intentionally abandon prayer. Do not intentionally leave prayer. And man, like, I know we did justice to this already, but I want to just share with you one scary hadith, man. Like, it gives me like goosebumps, you know? Hadith comes in Muslim that the Prophet ﷺ says, Jabir ibn Abdullah, he brings us this hadith that the Prophet ﷺ says, بَيْنَ الرَّجُلِ وَبَيْنَ الْكُفْرِ وَالشِّرْكِ تَرْكُ الصَّلَاةِ. The Prophet ﷺ says, translation, the separating line between a Muslim and a disbeliever is abandoning prayer. Like, that's your identity, yo. Like, that's what separates you from a believer and a disbeliever. That is no light matter, man. Like, just today, I was like, somebody was bragging in front of me. I was asking them, so like, on average, be honest, when do you go to sleep? When were you going to sleep during spring break, on average? And he thought I'd be impressed if he told me a later number, right? And he was like, you know what, Brother Ameer? The latest I woke up was 5 p.m. I'm like, 5 p.m.? Are you like, I mean, he's like, well, yeah, but my mom told me, like, as long as I pray Fajr, I can go to sleep whenever and I can wake up whenever. Okay, you caught Fajr, bro, but what about Dhuhr? You missed it. And like, just how casual that conversation was bothers me. Here the Prophet is saying, like, if Islam had an identity card, prayer would be that. So that was the second advice of the Prophet ﷺ. Today is the third advice, and that's the only advice I'm going to share today. And that is the Prophet ﷺ said, لا تشربن الخمر فإنها مفتاح كل شر. The Prophet فإنها مفتاح كل شر. The Prophet ﷺ says, do not consume alcohol because it opens floodgates to all other evil. Do not consume alcohol and wine because it's the doorway to all other vices. And this is the advice our Prophet ﷺ gave. You guys, forgive me, I'm going to get on a little rant today, but I feel like alcohol being haram is as widely known as pork being haram. Like, we Muslims, we know this. Like, pork is haram, everybody knows, even non-Muslims know. And alcohol being haram is also something that is like, that is no secret to anyone. Yet, you go to Muslim countries, and it's strange that you'll see that liquor shops are so widely open in your face and alcohol is so widely consumed. You're confused for a second. Like, am I in a Muslim country? Like, I was visiting a country overseas. I won't mention a name just to not throw anybody under the bus. Like, we enter a restaurant and alcohol is being openly served. And I'm like, wow, like, I did not come to a Muslim country for a vacation to see this in my face. Like, I got enough of that, you know, where I'm coming from. And that's just, before we talk about Muslim countries, in non-Muslim countries like the United States, who's running the majority of the liquor shops, y'all? Unfortunately, it tends to be Muslims. We're the ones operating. I mean, I've shared this multiple times, an imam from Chicago telling us 42 liquor stores on south side of Chicago, majority owned by Muslims. La samahullah, man, like, Allah forgive and protect. I wanted to ask you guys, if somebody wanted to share, if you've gone overseas and, you know, if you've gone to the north side of Milwaukee even, you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen anything like this? If you got something to share, please share your experience. So because I know for a fact this is a widespread issue amongst us, or like vape shops and things like that too. If somebody has any thoughts or reflections on this, especially those of you who are on the business scene, it's crazy how widespread it is. Now, the question people ask is like, why is alcohol such a big deal, man? Like, it's just a drink, like, you know, sip or two, come on. Like, why is Islam going so, why does Islam have such a harsh stance against alcohol? Well, let me share with you a few benefits and wisdoms of why alcohol is such a big vice in our religion, to the point that the Prophet ﷺ says it opens the door to all other vices. First thing, innahu yuzilu al-aql. First thing alcohol does, it retires your intellect. It literally retires your intellect, meaning you lose intellectual grip on yourself. Your mind is gone. And it's so deep, like, this gets deep, yo. The word for intellect in Arabic is aql, which comes from the Arabic word iqal. Iqal is what the Arabs would use for reins on a horse or an animal that you ride. So this rein, what it does, is like the horse is going too fast and you want to keep your horse in check, you would obviously pull on the reins. It keeps your horse in control. Similarly, Arabs use the same word for aql because aql reigns in your emotions, reigns in your urges, reigns in your temptations and inclinations. And when that aql is gone, that control is gone, now you let loose. Now you unravel. Now you unwind in front of anything evil. So, إِنَّهُ يُزِيلُ الْعَقْلِ. When that self-control, that intellectual control is gone, now it basically, you have no check left against any vice that you come across. And that's why y'all be shocked to know 80% cases of domestic violence, 80% cases of domestic violence were connected with alcohol or drug usage. Because when the mind messes up, a person loses control. And same thing, I was reading, subhanAllah, that the leading cause of death in the United States is what? Anybody knows? Leading cause of death in the United States? No?
I mean, since we are talking about alcohol, I would say alcohol, but yeah, I mean, like I have other things to say about like alcohol as well, that like, you know, alhamdulillah, we as Muslims are like, you know, prohibited from alcohol, like, and we don't realize how lucky we are if we follow it. But I know so many non-Muslim people who are making example out of it. They'll say like, no, we are trying to stay sober, and we've been away from alcohol for past 2 years, and life is completely different. Life is good without it.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. What I was going to mention is that alcohol is the leading, drunk driving is the leading cause of death in the United States, man. Why? Same thing. You lose intellectual grips. You're not going to control yourself on the wheel. And man, there was we all, I don't know if you guys heard, a Muslim family, you know, a husband, a mother, and a beautiful daughter. They were walking on the street and a drunk driver came and just crashed into them. They pretty much all died on the spot. How many heartbreaking stories do we have?
I have a question.
Yes.
You said that was the leading death, but I remember it's a heart disease.
Yeah, so from the latest research I did, it remains one of the leading causes. Maybe it's in the top 2 or 3, but either one of the leading causes or the leading causes, and that is drunk driving, man. It is tragic just how many stories we have on our hands. So the first thing,
and there was an article actually. It said any % of alcohol is bad for you. So even when people argue that, oh, only obsessive drinking is bad, you can just show them the article that shows that even any % of it is harmful for you.
Wow, barakallah feek for sharing that, man. I read that article as well. Is that initially people are like, yeah, but one glass can't hurt, but across the board, it's harmful for you. And that tells you, man, when Allah makes something haram, like He knows what's good for you. Like Allah ya'lamu man khalaq, Allah says, do I not know what I created? Do I not know what's good for you? Do I not know your default setting to how you can maximize yourself? It harms you. That's why I made it haram. On that note, I was sharing how how alcohol retires the intellect. Second thing alcohol does, it silences your conscience. And this is even more dangerous than before. It silences your conscience. And that's why you will see people involved in terrible crimes are drenched in alcohol. Heck, you see it in movies. Any crime movie you pick up, any mafia, drug cartel related movie, any law and order, for example, or any show related to solving crimes, you'll see alcohol is ubiquitous. Because you kind of need that alcohol to drown your guilt, to drown that inner voice that you have not been listening to and living a godless life. Alcohol comes and just silences that. So that's another thing that alcohol does. And the third thing I would mention, so I'm trying to make them like catchy as possible. Silences, it retires your intellect, silences your conscience, and the third thing, it mutes your manners. It mutes your manners. So I remember when I was in the corporate world, it was well known amongst the colleagues that when bosses go on booze guzzling frenzy and the ties come off, you know, after a while as they're drunk, they look so pathetic and pitiful, man. Because once again, that grip, that the self-control, that discipline is gone. You unravel, you unwind, and there's no check left after that. And same dignified individual lose all dignity and they look pitiful. Now, a lot of you all are in the college scene and we know, like, you know, Jaeger bomb and like beer pong, those are things, you know. Madison is one of the biggest party college, you know, in the country. It's inescapable. It's inescapable how widespread alcohol is, fireball and everything else. Like, I think I know too much on this issue. Like, and I've heard foreign exchange students are struggling, dude. Like Muslim foreign exchange students, like they're like falling for this. I don't know if you guys have seen anything like this on college scene. Not you guys, mashallah, you guys are religious, like, but I'm just saying, like, other folks, like, have you heard while you're on?
Unfortunately, like one of my really close like Muslim friends, like whom I'm not really in touch as much now, but in my first few years of UWM, he's a foreign student too, and he's coming from a Muslim country.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to brag about, may Allah forgive him, but like he used to brag about how the Muslim country is coming from is like so far ahead of United States in terms of this, that it's like the world's second. It's on second spot in the sin countries of the world. Like, you know how they have sin cities.
Yeah.
Like we either top the chart of the sin countries, or we are the second, like, you know, in terms of being the sin country in the world, something like that. And the number one reason is alcohol, and the number two reason for that is gambling. And
that's crazy, man. That's crazy. Allah protect all of us, man. And I'm telling you, man, it becomes more and more obvious. It's becoming more and more public and prominent in even the Muslim countries. On that note, I wanted to kind of wrap up this advice of the Prophet ﷺ that do not consume alcohol because it opens doors for everything else. Just, you know, I hear this sometimes. Not only consuming alcohol is like off limits for Muslims, but transacting when it comes to alcohol is also off limit. Where does that come from? Hadith comes in Bukhari, explicit hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha, she says that the Prophet ﷺ harrama tijarat al-khamr. The Prophet ﷺ forbade transacting, trading when it comes to alcohol. And then the Prophet ﷺ kind of zooms out in another hadith that comes in Abu Dawood, that Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh says that the Prophet ﷺ says, "Inna Allah idha harrama akla shay'in harrama alayhim thaman." That when Allah makes something impermissible, He also makes it forbidden to transact or commoditize that very thing. Now, buying, selling, gifting, exchanging also becomes off limits. And like you hear this from us and they're like, yeah, but I'm not drinking it. Like, you know, I'm just providing a service that people need. Really? Oh, it's not that easy, is it? When something is haram, dealing and engaging in it also harams in all different ways. So I don't know, like, have you guys heard the excuses people make who are selling alcohol? You know, I hear things like, I gotta pay the bill, food on the table. Muhammad, do you have something?
Yeah, actually, my dad used to years ago, like when he first came, like he it's not that
I wouldn't mention specific individuals, but go ahead.
no, but like this, I mean, I'm not gonna just out my dad for no reason, but I have like a story behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So like when he first came, like he knew it was, but he didn't know to the extent, and like he wasn't really that religious. He was like really young in his 20s. And then later when he found out it's haram and it's like actually really bad, like he knew the extent of it. He actually sold his liquor store for very, very little because he didn't want, like, I think he even gave it away because he didn't want any money from it.
SubhanAllah, that's beautiful, man. And you know what?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Did you want to add something to that?
No, I was just gonna say, like, when he found out, he was like, you know, I have to do this. So he just went to college and like he got a degree and he just changed his income, you know.
MashaAllah, man. That's beautiful. May Allah, and you know what? Our Prophet has told us, anyone who gives up something for Allah, Allah will replace it with something better. And I'll end on this note, inshallah, and we're done for our session tonight. Which, you know, garbage in, garbage out. Like our scholars and you know, and our Imam have basically talked about this. When you feed your body junk, you do junky things. Like garbage in, garbage out, filth in, filth out. A lot of times people, they're like, I'm too lazy to do good deeds. Well, you got to ask yourself, what are you putting inside your body? Because what you eat has a spiritual impact on what your body then produces. So people who are, particularly people who are like running haram businesses, like the kind of things they're providing their family, they're making it difficult for those very families to have wholesome spiritual lives, man. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us tawfiq to do what is pleasing to Him, and allow us to stay away from this heinous, terrible sin that alcohol consumption and selling is. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cure this community from this cancer and other communities across the world. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Thank you guys for tuning in. This was awesome. Inshallah, Tuesday and Thursday, I hope inshallah we can do more of these. Assalamu alaikum.